President Donald Trump and the Republican Party is facing a bitter setback as Democrats look to seize U.S. House control. Robbie de Guzman tells us why.
Democrats rode a wave of dissatisfaction with President Donald Trump to win control of the U.S. House of Representatives on Tuesday, giving them the opportunity to block Trump's agenda and open his administration to intense scrutiny. In midterm elections, 2 years after he won the White House, Trump and his fellow Republicans expanded their majority in the U.S. Senate following a divisive campaign marked by fierce clashes over race, immigration, and other cultural issues. But with his party losing its majority in the House, the results represented a bitter setback for Trump after a campaign that became a referendum on his leadership. With some races still undecided, Democrats appeared headed to a gain of more than 30 seats, well beyond the 23 they needed to claim their first majority in the 435-member House in 8 years. The newly empowered House Democrats will have the ability to investigate Trump's tax returns, possible business conflicts of interest, and allegations involving his 2016 campaign's links to Russia. They also could force Trump to scale back his legislative ambitions, possibly dooming his promises to fund a border wall with Mexico, pass a second major tax cut package, or carry out his hardline policies on trade. A simple House majority would be enough to impeach Trump if evidence surfaces that he obstructed justice or that his 2016 campaign colluded with Russia. But Congress could not remove him from office without a conviction by a two-thirds majority in the Republican-controlled Senate. House Democrats could be banking on launching an investigation using the results of U.S. Special Counsel Robert Mueller's already 18-month-old probe of allegations of Russian interference on Trump's behalf in the 2016 presidential election. Moscow denies meddling, and Trump denies any collusion.
We will have accountability, and we will strive for bipartisanship. With fairness on all sides, we will have a responsibility to find our common ground where we can, stand our ground where we can't, but we must try. We have a bipartisan marketplace of ideas that makes our democracy strong. A Democratic Congress will work for solutions that bring us together.
Despite his party losing the House, Trump wrote on Twitter, "Tremendous success tonight." Robbie de Guzman, UNTV, News and Rescue.
Women won big in the U.S. midterm elections on Tuesday, with U.S. media predicting more than 100 women winning election or re-election in races across the country. Voters in Minnesota and Michigan elected the first two Muslim women to serve in the U.S. Congress, a former refugee who fled Somalia's civil war and a Detroit-born Palestinian American. The victories by the two Democrats, Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, came on an election night when members of multiple minority groups had a chance to score electoral firsts. Democrats Sharice Davids, a mixed martial arts fighter, and Deb Haaland became the first Native American women elected to Congress. Although Republicans retain control of the Senate, Democrats seize control of U.S. House of Representatives, giving them the opportunity to block Trump's agenda and open his administration to intense scrutiny. The dollar weakened versus the euro and sterling as traders reacted to the Democratic Party winning control of the U.S. House of Representatives, empowering it to block President Donald Trump's agenda and scrutinize his administration. Analyst says a split Congress may partially hurt the dollar because the Democratic Party's capture of the House of Representatives is unlikely to be seen as a repudiation of Trump and his policies that have boosted corporate growth. The dollar index DXY lost 0.28% to trade at 96.04. The greenback has outperformed most of its key rivals this year, benefiting from a robust domestic economy and higher interest rates. The midterm election result is seen as unlikely to have a material impact on the U.S.-Chinese trade dispute, and the dollar can be expected to get a safe haven bid if trade tensions between Washington and Beijing intensifies. Meanwhile, power consumers will have to pay more on their electric bills this month after Meralco announced a slight increase on its rates. Mai Bermudez tells us why.
The Manila Electric Company or Meralco is poised to raise its rates after 2 months of rate reduction. According to Meralco, an additional 11 centavos per kilowatt hour will be reflected in customers' November billing statement. This is equivalent to 23 peso additional charge for household consumption of 200 kilowatts per month and around 60 peso increase for those consuming 500 kilowatts per month. Meralco says the rate increase is due to the adjustments in prices in the wholesale electricity spot market, generation, and other charges. With the looming increase in power rates, the Lambino family fears more difficult times ahead as they are yet to settle their 5,000 peso bill for the previous month. A notice of power disconnection has already been received by the family this week.
Kasi wala rin magagawa dahil kailangan bayaran to. Pag di binayaran, putol, di ba? Mataas talaga, mahirap.
But according to Meralco, an 11 centavo hike is much lower compared to the combined 25 centavo decrease in power bills in the past 2 months.
Yung presyo ng kuryente bumababa nung nagdaang 2 buwan. Pero ngayong buwan talagang dahilan na rin sa several factors, including the rise in prices in the spot market dahil sa mataas na demand. Nagkaroon ng slight 11 centavos per kilowatt hour reduction.
Meralco also sees a possible decrease in rates in the coming months as global oil prices continue its downward trend. Meralco still advises consumers to be energy efficient and use appliances wisely. Mai Bermudez, UNTV News and Rescue, Pasig City.
Some transport groups insist that the 4 consecutive weeks of oil price rollback should not be a basis to suspend the newly imposed fare hike on jeepneys and buses. Meanwhile, the Land Transportation Franchising and Regulatory Board or LTFRB has started the review of the new fare matrix. Grace Gasin tells us why.
Several transport groups are complaining against the possible suspension of the newly imposed fare increase among jeepneys and buses. This was after the 4 consecutive weeks of oil price rollback. From October 15 to November 6, the price of gasoline per liter has decreased to more than 5 pesos, 3 pesos for diesel, and more than 2 pesos for kerosene. But transport groups argued that the said rollback should not be a basis to suspend the existing fare hike. Zenny Maranan of FEDUDAP said it had taken the LTFRB more than a year before they approved the 2 peso fare increase. She added that the long wait caused them to lose income significantly.
Ang halaga ng krudo nung hinihingi namin to ay 29 pesos and 50 centavos. Iambing mo nga yung 29 pesos and 50 centavos na ngayon. Bumaba na, sabihin natin 46 na o 47. O, anong ibababa doon sa pamasahe? Kaya wag naman, kawawa kami.
Earlier today, the LTFRB has started to review the new fare increase in accordance with the instruction of the Department of Transportation. LTFRB Chairman Martin Delgra said they will consider all the possible bases of the fare increase and assures that they will be balanced the interests of both passengers and transport groups. Aside from the oil prices, Chairman Delgra said there are a lot of things that they will consider if they will revise the fare hike.
So we have to look at inflation, consumer price index, no? Even in anticipation of yung mga galawan sa mga ganong klaseng mga bagay-bagay na yan.
Apart from the LTFRB, other government agencies such as National Economic Development Authority, the Department of Trade and Industry, and DOLE, transport and commuter groups will also join the review of the new fare structure. Meanwhile, the LTFRB also explained the kilometer basis of the new matrix. Chairman Delgra said that instead of destination, they have to use the kilometer basis, which is more simplified, so the passengers will be able to easily identify how much fare they're going to pay.
Alam din po natin dito sa Metro Manila Sa maraming lugar sa Metro Manila, kahit na may mga jeepney stops yan, yung mga pasahero ay kahit saan-saan na lang sumasakay at bumababa, no? So nawawala yung tinatawag niyong landmark or for that matter yung jeepney stops. So minarapat namin to simplify yung fare matrix.
Delgra is confident that this will not be a source of overcharging cases. He also assures that PUV drivers who will be caught taking advantage of this new fare matrix will be penalized. Grace Casin, UNTV News and Rescue, Quezon City.
The economic team of the Duterte administration stands its recommendation to suspend the second tranche of fuel excise taxes in 2019 despite easing oil prices in the world market. Rosalie Cos tells us why.
The price of petroleum in the world market will remain at $70 per barrel in the coming months. This is the projection of oil-producing countries, according to the Department of Energy.
We are very dependent on what is happening in the international market. So our informations are based on the forecast of the developing, producing, and exporting countries. And if I would just share with you what the forecast of for the coming months, it's said that it would remain at the 70 level. I mean, low 70s and the high 70s.
Despite the downward trend in global oil prices, the economic managers would not withdraw the recommendation to suspend the implementation of the second tranche of fuel excise tax next year, according to the Department of Finance. The scheduled additional tax on oil and gasoline per liter is 2 pesos for the first quarter of 2019. A provision of the Tax Reform for Acceleration and Inclusion or TRAIN law states that the next round of oil excise tax will be suspended if the average price of Dubai crude based on mean of Platts Singapore reaches or exceeds $80 per barrel for 3 consecutive months.
The recommendation stands because when it was made, the price was above the threshold, lagpas sa $80 per barrel, at saka pati po yung futures na tinitingnan natin, yung futures prices hanggang end of the year ay lagpas din po sa 80 at the time the recommendation was made.
The economic managers still await the order of President Duterte on the submitted recommendation. They are also looking to take their next step when the suspension of fuel excise tax takes effect in 2019.
Ideally, ang gusto po sana natin gawin ay i-review yung recommendation after it is implemented. So at some point next year.
Rosalie Cos, UNTV News and Rescue, Malacanang.
Several senators have begun studying the possible substitute for the administration's proposed tax reform package 2 or Trabaho bill. The lawmakers believe that the controversy in the price hike on basic commodities makes it more difficult for the bill to be approved. Nel Maribohok will tell us why.
The Congress will resume its session next week. Despite this, the passage of the proposed Package 2 of the Tax Reform for Acceleration and Inclusion, also known as Trabaho Bill, is still facing challenges. According to Senate President Vicente Soto III, instead of pushing for the said Malacanang version, they will push the version of the Senate that provides lesser risk for some industries whose tax incentives will be removed.
5 years ka nang may tax incentive. Rationalize natin, dapat ka bang dagdagan pa? Dapat bang i-extend ka o hindi? Ganun. Hindi namin sinabing huwag na alisin agad.
Under SP Soto's version of tax reform, the lowering of corporate tax to 25% from 30% will be immediately implemented upon the enactment of the bill. Under the Trabaho Bill, there are risks that some tax incentives enjoyed by some industries may be removed, and corporate taxes will be lowered in tranches. But Senator Joel Villanueva is looking at another substitution of Train 2. The senator wants to implement reforms in the value-added tax or VAT system in the country. He will push to lower the VAT rate to 10% from 12%.
I think all of you would agree with me na marami tayong binibigay na incentives na hindi na naman kailangan. No? Iba, to start the ball rolling, kaya natin sila pinapasok, binigyan ng incentives. Tapos magugulat pala tayo, may forever dun sa incentives na binibigay natin. So it's about time na i-overhaul natin yung VAT system natin.
Based on the computation of the senator, if VAT will be reduced, the average family may have savings of 1,252 pesos per month. Meanwhile, the Senate President also said the economic managers are still uncertain if they will push for the suspension of excise tax for petroleum products under the Train 1.
Kaya sila nagdadalawang isip para flip-flop sila.
Okay.
Dahil nakikita nila yung malaking pakinabang.
The Senate President said the economic managers may present their data to show the good effects of the train law to the economy. Nel Maribuho, UNTV News and Rescue, Senate of the Philippines.
Up next on Y News. President Duterte clarifies order on military takeover on the Bureau of Customs. An expert says the Commission on Higher Education's mandatory drug testing of students for the next academic year poses a threat to life. And the Philippine National Police urges security agencies and business owners to prohibit security guards from wearing themed costumes, especially this holiday season. Thank you for keeping me company in the first part of Y News. More reasons behind the stories with Angelo, Castro III, and Thio after this quick break. I'm Rheena, Villamor-Camara. Good evening.
Mayor Paint. With Mayor, you paint more while you pay less.
Welcome back to Y News. We pick up from where Rheena Villamor-Camara left off. I'm Angelo Castro III, and here are the headlines. NTC names Udenna-China Telecom Group as the country's provisional third major telco player. Retailers request for a special window for rice imports in BOC. And the Philippine National Police to probe the killing of a lawyer who assisted in Sagay farmers' slay case. The National Telecommunications Commission names Udenna-China Telecom Consortium Group as the country's provisional third telecommunications player after hours of scrutinizing the submitted bidding documents. Juan Ocson tells us why.
The government has named the country's third provisional major telco player after hours of going over documents that were submitted by different bidders. The group of Davao businessman Dennis Uy's Udenna Corporation and its foreign partner China Telecom was provisionally selected to fill the third slot after the National Telecommunications Commission found their documents to be complete and satisfactory. The agency used in the selection process the highest committed level of service through a point system scheme, with criteria including population coverage, internet speed, and capital investment for 5 years. Prior to the announcement, only 3 out of 10 original groups who bought documents pushed through with the bidding, but the 2 telcos were disqualified at Wednesday's opening and evaluation of selection documents at the NTC. Sear Telecom was excluded because the committee found that their letter of credit was missing, while the PT&T failed to secure a certificate of technical capability.
In the process, there was less transparency during the proceedings, so I was hoping that there would have been more transparency in terms of being able to raise your concern as the bids are being opened.
In response to PT&T's complaint, the NTC says
We were told na they refused to receive the letter, no? And in-email din sa kanila.
Sear Telecom, on the other hand, plans to lodge a complaint against Udenna Corporation for their alleged illegal use of franchise.
They are using the franchise, the congressional franchise of Ms. Latel. And Ms. Latel, as it happens, has a contract with Digifil, which is a member of our consortium. And the contract prohibits Ms. Latel from allowing somebody else to use its permit and license, its franchise.
The two telcos can still appeal the decision by filing a motion for reconsideration in court within 3 days. Mon Hokson, UNTV, News and Rescue, Quezon City.
Retailers are asking the government to hasten the unloading process of imported rice, especially when it reaches ports in the country. Bernard Dadis explains why.
A total of 13 companies signified their interest to join the bidding to be set by the National Food Authority for the 500,000 metric tons of rice for importation. The NFA has allotted up to 12 billion pesos fund for the importation, and the rice supply is expected to be delivered in the months of December this year and January next year. The rice importation is pegged at 24 pesos per kilogram, and the agreement specified certain conditions, including fumigation against rice weevils. The NFA says such requirement is the responsibility of the supplier even after the imported rice reach Manila ports.
Yung reckoning ng ownership ng stocks, babayaran ng NFA at the quantity and the quality received doon sa pile sa warehouse na designate natin na doon sa dadalhin.
The NHA will also send inspectors to countries of origin to check on the quality of the imported rice before they are loaded in shipping vessels for delivery. Retailers says they support the government's effort to import additional rice buffer stocks, which they believe will help stabilize rice prices in local markets.
Masaya kami kung ito ay magtatagumpay para sa atin. Kasi tuloy-tuloy talaga na yung presyo ng bigas may stabilize natin.
However, the group calls for a special window in ports for the speedy processing and releasing of imported rice to avoid delays of up to 3 weeks like what happened to some of their members.
Na masuggest natin siguro sa NFA Council na kausapin ang Bureau of Customs and then yung per harbor na pagka NFA rice ang karga ng barko, ibigyan talaga ng priority para hindi naman masaktan yung mga exporter natin.
Bernard Dadis, UNTV News and Rescue, Philippines.
The Philippine National Police condemns the killing of attorney Benjamin Tarug Ramos Jr. Ramos, a founding member of the National Union of People's Lawyers, was among those who first assisted in the case of slain 9 sugarcane farmers in Sagay City. Ramos was gunned down in Cabangcalan City, Negros Occidental, Tuesday night by unidentified perpetrators. Police Regional Office 6 Director Chief Superintendent John Bulalakaw says the lawyer sustained 3 gunshot wounds on his chest and died on his way to the hospital. An investigation on the murder of Ramos is underway. President Rodrigo Duterte says he never instructed the armed forces of the Philippines to take over civilian posts in the Bureau of Customs. This was after critics questioned his order to place military personnel in the agency and put its section chiefs to a floating status. Victor Cosare tells us why.
President Rodrigo Duterte clarified on Tuesday that there was neither formal designation nor appointment given to the Armed Forces of the Philippines regarding their task to help cleanse the Bureau of Customs of corruption. Duterte came under fire after he ordered the military to man the BOC amid a series of controversy involving billions of pesos worth of smuggled shabu.
And there was never an instruction for them to take over the functions of the employees. What I did was to, since I cannot investigate one per day even to determine the guilt or the innocence of everybody there. So ang ginawa ko is just really to order them on floating status. But that was a particular order director for chiefs of offices and section chiefs. Yung mga assistant nila ang magtatrabaho.
Critics questioned the chief executive for his order, citing clear provisions of the law that no active military personnel shall hold any civilian position in the government. But the president insisted that unless law and order is restored inside BOC, military presence will remain in the agency.
Ano ba naman problema ninyo? Civilian supremacy over the military. Are we talking of numbers here? That when you say that the civilian authority is supreme, so that every one of them must be civilian? Or if we put one military man there and a few technical men of the armed forces of the Philippines, just see to it that everything is done properly. Ano? Militarization.
Malacanang previously clarified that government troopers are there only to observe and to extend assistance in customs operations. Duterte also advised the Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency to stop speculating on the amount of shabu concealed in 4 magnetic lifters found in Cavite after it slipped past the BOC. PDEA previously said that the illegal drugs smuggled in magnetic lifters were worth 11 billion pesos in total, which was higher than the initially reported amount of 6.8 billion pesos.
Because you feed to the public a wrong information, pero kung puno ito pagdating sa korte, hindi, sabihin ng judge, why are you assuming? Drug kasi parang illegal possession of firearms. Either you have it in your possession.
The president met with some members of his cabinet on Tuesday. Present in the meeting was former Customs Commissioner, now TESDA Director General Isidro La Peña. Victor Cosare, UNTV, News and Rescue, Philippines.
President Rodrigo Duterte promises to reward cops who neutralized a top Zamboanga del Norte police officer allegedly involved in the narcotics trade. Rosalie Cos tells us why.
President Rodrigo Duterte commended members of the Philippine National Police who were able to neutralize an alleged ninja cop identified as Police Superintendent Santiago Ilanan Rapis. Rapis was a logistics officer in Zamboanga del Norte Provincial Police. He resisted arrest and was killed when he attempted to escape in a buy-bust operation in Dipolog City on Monday night. Rapis was among the personalities in President Duterte's drug watch list for being a protector of the slain drug lord Melvin Odicta. President Duterte said he will reward those who were able to neutralize Rapis. Likewise, the chief executive said he is willing to reward any policeman who will be able to neutralize the bosses operating illegal drugs trade in the country.
Tama yun. Pakian mo, sir. I am going to reward that policeman. Any policeman who will kill a superior because the superior is into drugs, I will give you a prize on a trip to Hong Kong. If you have to convert it into money,
The president clarified, however, that he is not withdrawing the 3 million pesos reward to whosoever can arrest or neutralize a cop involved in illegal drugs. Duterte reiterated his stand that illegal drugs will do no good to the country as it will only corrupt government officials and even policemen. He considers the illegal drug menace as a national security issue, and so he insists his power to call the military in order to extend help to the national police in resolving the matter.
This is already a national conflagration. The police are there and everybody else, pati yung kayong mga mayor, pantay kayo. And I also want the barangay captains. I will get to you. One way or the other, maabutan ko talaga kayo. Pag mag-abot tayo, sorry na lang.
Rosalie Cos, UNTV, News and Rescue, Malacanang.
An expert considers CHED's mandatory drug testing of students for next academic year a threat to their life and safety. Aiko Miguel will tell us why.
The Commission on Higher Education will set to implement the mandatory drug testing in colleges, universities, and higher education institutions or HEIs in the country next academic year 2019-2020. This is stated in the release memo order number 18 of CHED last week. The conduct of mandatory drug testing will also be included in the student handbook of all universities. CHED reiterates that this move is a part of the reform and program of the Duterte administration's war on drugs. CHED will also get consent from parents for their children's drug testing. But according to an expert representing an organization of teachers, this seems to be a threat to children's security and deprivation of their rights to protect themselves.
So this is a clear threat, threat on the civil liberties of the youth. And considering the war on drugs, this is not just a threat on rights, but a threat to life. Anong pwedeng gawin dito? Ano yung gagawin nila doon sa mga resulta doon?
A third-year student of a university admits that drug testing is a good move, but making it mandatory seems to be violating the privacy of an individual.
Ang fear ko baka magkaroon ng false positive results na wala naman yung taong drugs pero lumabas na positive results.
On the other hand, the Aling Cristina, who is a grandmother of 2, favors the mandatory drug testing. This, she said, could rehabilitate drug positives and avert drug addiction among youth.
Maganda yun para sa kanila, para siguradong makaiwas sila sa mga ganong bagay. Kaya pinapirmahan ko na sa ama nila yung
In a statement of CHED Chairman Prospero de Vera III, he said their primary concern is the safety of the youth, so they want to assure campuses are drug-free. CHED assures that drug testing will be conducted in DOH-accredited facilities by experts and private medical practitioners. The PNP will not be a part of the drug testing, and they cannot enter campuses without the authority and coordination with school officials. Aiko Miguel, UNTV News and Rescue, Quezon City.
The Philippine National Police urges security agencies and business owners to prohibit security guards from wearing themed costumes while on duty during holiday season. Leah Ilagan tells us why.
The holiday season is still a few weeks away, but establishments everywhere and its personnel and guards are already decked out in festive and themed outfits. But according to the Philippine National Police Supervisory Office on Security and Investigation Agency, security guards should be wearing their prescribed uniforms while on duty. The PNP SOSHA also urges business owners and security agencies to prohibit security guards from wearing themed costumes this holiday season, as this could pose problems to the public in determining security personnel from establishments goers. Aside from security risk, costume could also hinder guards from properly carrying out their duties, especially in emergency cases.
Pwede kasing gayahin ito or magsuot ng ganito yung mga sindikato o mga grupo ng mga gustong gumawa ng krimen doon sa loob ng mall. Kaya malaking factor na hindi dapat sila magsuot ng ganyan dahil nangyari na yan before sa isang mall na pinasok ng martilyo gang.
Last week, the agency stormed a mall in Quezon City following reports about its costume-wearing security guards. The PNP SOSHA ordered the mall security agency to pay 400,000 pesos in fines and their security personnel be disarmed.
Pagka talagang ganun pa rin, naging recidivist sila o naging habitual, hindi talaga nila pinakikinggan yung aming sanction sa kanila. Ang mangyayari niyan, mag-o-order ang chief SOSHA na itag or isuspend na yung kanilang license, pati yung mismong operator.
The agency meanwhile assures that tighter security measures are in place in malls and other areas to prevent crime incidents in the upcoming holiday season. Police patrol and visibility around the mall's vicinity will also be intensified.
Ang aming paalala kapag may insidente at pangyayari sa mga business establishments, mga malls, kaagad yung mga bantay sa mga entrances, dapat tumawag kaagad ng kanilang response team. No? Meron silang naka-standby pa dyan ng mga guard. Huwag nilang iiwanan yung entrance, no? Dahil yung seguridad, maaring kwan lang ito, diversionary tactic, tuloy-tuloy na yung pasok ng mga magnanakaw.
Leah Ilagan, UNTV, News and Rescue, Camp Grame.
Some groups of Yolanda survivors and the Philippine Movement for Climate Justice slammed the government's rather much slower pace of rehabilitation project a day before the 5th year commemoration of the typhoon. Grace Casin will tell us why.
Tomorrow, November 8, is the 5th year commemoration of the Typhoon Yolanda that hit Tacloban City and other parts of Eastern Visayas. But according to Danny Carranza, the advocacy lead person of the Community of Yolanda Survivor and Partners Rehabilitation, President Rodrigo Duterte failed to keep his promise to finish the housing project in 1 year. Hence, the reconstruction continued to be slow-moving 5 years after the typhoon.
And walang pagkakaiba dun sa dinanas na rehabilitation efforts under the previous administration. In fact, mas bumagal pa nga.
Romel de la Cruz, one of the typhoon survivors, was emotional, saying even if they survived the deadly typhoon, the government seemed to have neglected them.
Parang wala po kasi pakialam yung mga gobyerno dun sa amin sa probinsya.
Meanwhile, the data from the Philippine Movement for Climate Justice or PCMJ shows that of 205,000 target housing project for Yolanda victims, only 90,000 were built, 50,000 of which are still unoccupied. PCMJ Secretary General Aaron Pedrosa wants the government to explain why the rehabilitation seemed to have worsened.
Dahil sa kaliwat ka ng anomalya, hindi na malinaw kung ito'y pumunta dun sa target beneficiaries or napunta dun sa mga kontraktor na kine-question mismo at nire-recommend ng COA na hindi lang imbestigahan kundi patawan ng karampatang parusa.
Presidential spokesperson Secretary Salvador Panelo said they are addressing the issues that caused the delays, such as limited availability of titled lands for resettlement and slow processing and issuance of permits and licenses for construction projects. Panelo urged the Senate to speed up the passage of the Department of Disaster Resilience Act to push for better disaster resilience measures. Grace Casin, UNTV News and Rescue, Quezon City.
Up next on Y News.
These mass grave sites documented in our report are a testament to harrowing human loss, profound suffering, and shocking cruelty.
United Nations reports more than 200 mass graves of Islamic State victims found in Iraq.
Unsafe sanitation is a huge economic burden.
Microsoft co-founder and billionaire Bill Gates talks about futuristic toilets and lauds free trade on China trip. And Tesla owners test cars' remote control system. And those are the reasons behind the stories in the second part of our newscast. Y News returns with William Thio. I'm Angelo Castro III. Good evening.